られないでも諦めない木箱拳握りしめこの運命と明日の記憶きつく抱いて守るよ
Hibari went to retrieve her drink from the vending machine. Compared to the day before, today was turning out to be completely boring. Mimiko wasn't there to tease about Jiro. The usual crew was all out on assignments, and there was no real juicy gossip to spread or anyone to really spread it to, which was absolutely annoying and unacceptable in her book. Chihuru, one of her fellow compromisers, tottered past, her face all flushed. She was acting very flustered, more so than usual. And this girl was easily flustered. Sensing a bit of fun, Hibari went in for the kill.
Hey, Chihuru. Got a new assignment, or is it a hot date?
She was rewarded by the younger girl turning beet red.
Come on, tell Auntie Hibari all about it.
Chihuru looked like she was going to try and dodge out, but Hibari was faster, grabbing her by the wrist and latching on.
Dates.
She looked around nervously. Hibari beamed in her face.
Come on, so who is it?
She led the poor soul towards a few chairs, forcing her to sit with her.
Someone in the company, a civilian...
She stopped suddenly, putting one hand to her chest in shock.
Don't tell me. It's a vampire.
Chihuru almost fainted, her face going white.
No.
She tried to stammer, but nothing much came out. The older girl thought for a moment.
On second thought, I think Mimiko is the only one who has a vampire chasing after her, right?
She let the girl's wrist go as she shrugged. It would be too good to be true if another compromiser had a black blood after her. The moment the younger compromiser's hand was free, she was jumping up and heading towards the door.
Sorry, gotta go.
Hibari watched after her. What a strange duck. Maybe she had to use the bathroom, she mused. She decided there wasn't really anything she could do about it now, except spread some rumors. She went in search of the first person available. Jiro had been reluctant. He had no idea what the Crimsonite Zelman wanted, nor was he sure he wanted to find out. He was still smoldering over the incident over a week ago. But he had to be courteous, even if the brunette was asleep. She'd probably hear about it sooner or later anyway, and vent her frustration over the matter. After all, she was a compromiser and wanted everyone to get along. He ushered Zelman into the main level of the apartment, not bothering to invite him to the living level upstairs.
All right.
He folded his arms, his face showing his disapproval.
What do you want? Tell me quickly. Mimiko is sleeping, and I'd rather she not be disturbed.
Zelman moved freely about the semi-cluttered space, randomly touching a box here and there. Hearing Jiro's tone, though, he put both hands in his pockets.
That's hardly a complimentary tone, Silverblade. It's not like I'm the one who's been harassing little Mimiko.
Jiro ground his teeth, not that he needed that kind of excuse to dislike the older vampire.
My patience is very thin today.
He wondered what the Crimson-Eyed Butcher meant when he'd called her little Mimiko. Zelman put his hands in the air, though his air was more teasing than angry.
Fine, forget the pleasantries.
He put his hands back in his pockets and grinned maliciously for a moment, then settled his face back to a more neutral expression.
I have some information that you might find very useful. Something Janai would probably never tell you. Willingly.
The Silverblade's curiosity was piqued, but he wasn't about to admit it. He absently felt for his blade, but it was safely out of reach, upstairs. He cursed silently for not grabbing it on the way down.
You don't need to be so defensive. I'm not going to do anything to harm either you, Kotaro, or the compromiser.
Jiro doubted that, and it showed.
Tell me what you came to tell me, then. I'm very busy, as I'm sure you are aware.
Zelman laughed easily.
Very well. You know, you young people are always so impatient.
He leaned back against one of the larger boxes, pulling out a cigarette and lit it with a flick of his fingers.
You might want to make yourself comfortable, Silverblade. This is a long tale.
He inhaled deeply before beginning, giving Jiro a chance to find a seat, since he didn't seem inclined to lead them to a more comfortable setting.
About 18 or 20 years ago, Hong Kong was just starting to accept vampires. You should know, you were there in the area. Well, that is, when you weren't gallivanting around with a sage.
He smiled at Jiro's reaction, pausing only momentarily in his explanation to take another pull from his death stick.
Janai Shugo had started a program of compromisers to help mediate between humans and vampires. A noble effort on his part, I might add. But not all vampires wanted to see humans as equals. preferring to view them as sources of food instead of potential allies and friends.
Jiro rolled his eyes, shifting his weight impatiently.
I'm well aware of those factions, Zelman, and I don't need a history lesson. If you're not going to tell me something I don't know, you might want to seriously consider leaving before I ask more forcefully.
Zelman tisked at him.
You never change, do you?
He grinned at some private joke. It was just as well.
Still no appreciation for history. Then let me get to the main point of the story, the part that you'll be most interested in. Because it involves Mimiko Katsuragi's parents. Times were hard. Even though parts of Hong Kong had accepted vampires in their existence, not everyone was thrilled with the arrangements, including those various vampire factions. There was one vampire in particular who seemed even less inclined to want to change to the new way of thinking. His name was Kanai Raiden. Among his men, he was called the Zealous Thunder God. He actually had quite the following, I'm told.
His expression suggested, however, that he knew more about that than he was telling.
There was one compromiser who did not want to give up hope on converting him to a more peaceful way of living, like so many of the other bloodlines had. Her name was Amaya Katsuragi, Mimiko's mother. She had been a compromiser for 2 years when she was given the assignment to try and reason with Kanai. We both know there was no reasoning with a vampire in that mindset. The Kowloon children are one example of that. Humans, to them, are just trash, a convenient source of food, and subservient to a greater vampire who may do with them as they please. But Amaya was determined to give her best effort.
Jiro couldn't help but think of Mimiko with that description. Apparently it was an inherited trait.
However, after several months of trying to convince him to coexist peacefully, the company gave up on the idea. Unfortunately for her, the Zealous Thunder God had a personal vendetta against her and her family, vowing that they should be eradicated completely. Perhaps he thought if he used her family as an example, the company would back down and retake their subservient role. Who knows what his crazed mind set on? All that really matters is that he saw the Katsuragi family as a personal enemy that had to be eradicated, at any cost. He carefully planned his assault, but some of his men became impatient and struck before he was ready. A fatal mistake on their part. We were tipped off by an over-arrogant follower about the hit. Unfortunately, we arrived too late to save her parents, but we did manage to save the girl.
Zelman threw his wasted cigarette to the ground, smashing it under his heel.
The suppression team made quick work of the vampires attacking the house. Amaya had managed to escape out of a window, taking her small young child with her. But she didn't make it past the yard. Mimiko was found some ways from the house.
He trailed off, baiting Jiro. Jiro let his fangs show, his eyes hard. In the back of his mind, he heard 4 words running over and over again. He wondered what Zelman had meant. Surely he hadn't been involved as well. It wasn't like him, unless he had something to gain from it.
Why was I never told about this?
His anger broke the silence. He vaguely remembered, now that he thought about it, the name of Amaya Katsuragi. Did he know her? Zelman gave a casual shrug.
Who knows? Maybe they didn't think you could handle it. Knowing Mimiko's past, that is. Not many people know, only the ones who were there.
He took out another cigarette and lit it.
Besides, I doubt she remembers it. Janai decided it was best that she forgot about it.
Jiro stared in shock.
You don't mean he...
He couldn't say it. It was too horrible to think about, even if it had been done as a protection. Sealing away someone's memories was dangerous, and it was far from acceptable, especially if the person whose memories were sealed didn't have a say in the matter. Zelman's expression turned serious for once in their entire conversation.
Yes, Silverblade. I mean exactly that. Janai asked to have it done because he couldn't stand to watch her wake screaming every night from the nightmares about her parents' murder. He couldn't stand to see her being mentally torn apart, because it started to tear him apart. You may call him weak for not wanting to live that night over and over again, through her eyes, as she screamed and cried to make it stop.
Jiro felt like he'd been slapped. He had no idea that she'd had that kind of past. But still, to seal away her memories, to take away a critical part of her past, it was unacceptable. He grabbed Zelman roughly by the collar. He entirely forgot that Mimiko was sleeping upstairs, that Katara was just up in his room playing.
Who? Who did he ask? Was it you? Tell me!
Zelman ignored the outburst. Instead, he looked over the enraged vampire's shoulder towards the stairs.
you might think about being a bit more quiet. Didn't you say Mimiko was trying to sleep?
Jiro did not let him go.
I want to know who sealed her memory, Zelman Clock! I want to know everything you aren't telling me, and I want to know now!
Zelman smirked. He was about to open his mouth when Kotaro called from upstairs.
Brother, you down there?
Jiro froze. His fingers released Zelman's lapel as he turned slowly to face the stairs, composing his face. Zelman took the opportunity to slide a few paces away, though he was just as curious about Kotaro's appearance as Jiro was. However, with Jiro's outburst, it wasn't entirely surprising that the young black blood had come to investigate. Kotaro poked his head around the doorway at the top of the stairs.
Brother? There you are. I thought you were taking a nap.
Zelman stifled a snort behind his hand, pretending to light another cigarette. The younger vampire's expression was so amusing. With the sound, Kotaro noticed his brother's company.
Oh, hello, Zelman.
He waved as he came down the stairs.
What are you doing here? Did you come to see Mimiko?
The old blood smiled warmly.
Oh, I was just checking in to see how she's holding up. Jiro was kind enough to inform me that she was sleeping. I was just on my way out.
Zelman!
The crimson-eyed vampire merely shrugged.
We'll just have to talk again later. I'm supposed to be meeting with the whole assembly before too long. You don't want me to be late, do you?
Jiro couldn't say anything, and it frustrated him no end. He had no idea if he was telling the truth or not, but he supposed it didn't really matter. He probably would get nothing else from him, not now that Kotaro had joined them so unexpectedly. Zelman had already opened the door to the outside. The redhead turned to wave.
Tell Mimiko I said hello.
He turned back and shut the door behind him. Kotaro waved back, completely unaware that he'd interrupted something important. Jiro sighed, letting some of the tension in his shoulders release. He shouldn't be bantering with other old bloods, even if he had information that would prove very useful. Mimiko was still asleep and very vulnerable. Even though the area was fairly secure, anything could go wrong, and usually did.
Let's go, Kotaro.
Okay.
He headed back up the stairs. Almost on the other side of the special zone, in an abandoned warehouse, Chihiro waited nervously. She checked her watch for the 10th time in under a minute. Either her watch was no longer working, or they were late. She tried to smooth her blouse, not company issue. She'd exchanged the uniform for something more civilian over an hour ago, but the anticipatory anxiety of what was going to happen tonight had been more than enough to keep her poor heart fluttering in spasms and fits. She clasped her hands, both of which were clammy. It had been quite a while since she'd last had her blood sucked. At least it seemed like it had. When the Kowloon children had showed up, she'd been a bit more hesitant, afraid that one of her own coven had become one of the hated clan. But she needn't have worried. They had disliked the Kowloon as much as the company had, though probably not for the same reasons. Chihiro was having withdrawals, had been for over a week now, though no one seemed to have noticed. Everything that had gone on with that Katsuragi girl had kept their attention from her, which was good. It also kept her free to help in the preparations for tonight. Tonight, she'd be welcoming in one of the most important black bloods she'd ever met, the vampire who had saved her several years ago. And though she went through the motions of her daily life, she couldn't understand why so many of her fellow redbloods didn't just let the vampires take a little nip every now and again. It was pure euphoria, better than any drug. Footsteps sounded from outside. Her heart sped up. Had she been discovered? Or was it her accepted clan finally showing up? One of the many doors opened, 4 or 5 vampires entering the building. She let out a sigh of relief. She knew every one of them had had her blood sucked by each in turn. They were laughing casually amongst themselves. Each had accepted a job somewhere in the special zone, blending in with the natives. One even drove a taxi. There were quite a few more of them, but only 5 were needed for tonight's venture. The others were safely hidden, finalizing plans, minus the one that the coven had gotten in torn apart. It was an unavoidable loss in this battle, and the vampire had been stupid, actually attacking in broad daylight.
There she is.
One called, like they'd been waiting for Chihiro instead of the other way around.
Told you she couldn't resist.
He walked over to the compromiser, who was blushing furiously. She immediately began unbuttoning the top buttons of her shirt, mentally preparing herself to have her craving filled. The vampire who had spoken put a hand on her shoulder.
Not yet, love.
He laughed at her eagerness.
Need to do a job first. Then we'll suck all you want.
His fellows laughed, like he told some joke.
We're going for a little ride. Our god has finally arrived and needs an invitation.
Janai stared absently at his office door. Various reports had come in over the course of the day, mainly minor incidents around the special zone, things that might or might not be related. He'd sent teams out to investigate, but so far there was no news. He steepled his fingers, resting his forehead on them, elbows on his desk. How long had it been since he'd had a decent night's sleep, he wondered. Too long. A soft knock came at the door, and he called out for whoever to enter. Runsuke's purple hair poked through the doorway as the man leaned around the frame, one hand still on the doorknob.
Hey, Chief.
In the other hand, he held a folder.
You're up rather late. I have the lab reports back for you, though.
He moved into the room. Janai indicated that he should leave the file on the desk as he rubbed at his eyes, trying to get the sleep out of them. He leaned back in his chair without touching the file. Runsuke perched on the corner of the desk.
What is?
His expression matched his boss's apparent mood. Janai leaned forward again ever so slightly.
I'm getting old.
The purple-haired investigator blinked in surprise. Where had that come from? Sure, the man was reaching into his 40s. That didn't mean he was old.
I'm not sure I follow you.
It's all of this.
He indicated the pile of paperwork on his desk.
The stress, the waiting. I don't like sitting around feeling helpless. My little girl is in danger. The entire special zone could be in danger.
Runsuke didn't say anything. He didn't have to. They'd worked together for far too long not to understand each other.
I'm tired. I just want to be able to sleep through the night again, not stay up late wondering what'll happen next. What kind of threat will present itself?
We just have to go one day at a time. Consider it all a test of our strength. And every day, we only get stronger because we have to. I know you're worried about Mimiko, but she's in good hands. Don't forget, Badrick's men are keeping an eye out on him as well.
You're right. That's how things have always been and how they'll always be. There'll always be some threat on the horizon. I really need to stop borrowing trouble.
Runsuke smiled.
There. You see? It's not as bad as you were making it out to be. Every cloud has a silver lining.
Janai walked around the desk, clapping his companion on the back.
You're right. I'm going home to get some sleep. The special zone always calls early.
Runsuke watched his superior leave, wondering if he had forgotten about the report or if he was purposely ignoring it for the evening. It was rather late after all. He wondered if he should call him back to look it over, but he understood what it meant to carry a heavy burden. The report could wait until morning. Kanye Radon pushed the lifeless body away from him, then wiped his mouth. He could feel her blood swirling around inside him, strengthening him. It had been some time since he'd last tasted human blood, and it made him feel all the more powerful. It was too bad that he'd had to drain the poor human's life away in the process, but after resonating with him, she'd known too much to let her live. It was a pity, really. She'd been a useful tool, a way to smuggle his followers into the special zone, with no one the wiser for it.
My lord.
His lieutenant bowed low.
What should we do with the body?
He didn't look at the dead compromiser. He couldn't stand to. After all, he'd sort of grown attached to her, and revealing that might be a very bad idea. Kanye waved a hand.
Leave her. It's hardly likely they'll find her anytime soon. We proceed immediately as planned. Are our scouts in place?
The vampire bowed again.
Yes, my lord. The building is being guarded from the outside, and likely from inside. I've had all our brethren gather at the safe house. They've all been anxiously awaiting for your arrival.
Good. Let us not make them wait any longer. Soon everyone will know that the zealous Thunder God has returned.